We are continuing this week to work on this key individual chart about Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams was extremely important to the organizing of our country toward independence, getting people to think, getting people to reason, getting people to take action, to throw off the tyranny of the King of England and become an independent and self-governing country. He was very, very important. So that's why we're spending so much time studying him. In your packet this week, you have history number 19, page 2, which I punched holes on both sides of. I'm trying to make it a little lighter so that you wouldn't have to write on that ink, but I do like how this page looks. It's very, very interesting. So we're going to continue adding a little more to this page first, and then we're going to run out of room and have to go to the next page. So let's begin by reading in our book. We've read up through this part on page 112 to here. So we're going to begin with Champion of Liberty. Samuel was convinced that congregational church government was the most friendly to civil and religious liberty. This idea of church government was first brought to America by the Pilgrim congregation. So that's an important point. The way church was done for the Pilgrims, that was the model for how the government of our country would run. So let's write down underneath on this page, still we're on the first page, right down here at the bottom, you should have some room to write one more thing. If you don't, you can go on to the new page. So we're going to write, believed congregational church government most friendly to liberty. All right, so you're going to write this. Probably it'll be down here at the bottom of this first chart. So this was an influence on him. The government of the Congregational Church influenced his understanding of how government works and how liberty can be promoted. So he believed that the way their church was run was the best form of government for liberty. Liberty is freedom from restraint except what's needed to protect life, liberty, and property. So anything more than that is overkill on the part of the government. And that's what the English government was doing, overkill. They were trying to boss the colonies around, make lots of money off of them without them having any right to say what they wanted. Let's continue reading. At the top of this page right here. Samuel Adams had a strong will, which was always consistent with his convictions or his beliefs. One historian said that his will resembled well-tempered steel, which may ply, which means bend, but not break. Swords are made of well-tempered steel. A sword can bend when it's pushing against another sword or whatever, but it doesn't snap. It's made a special way that makes it flexible but not breakable. So he would listen to people and maybe change his mind if he felt they had a good point, but he was not going to be beaten down and made to change his mind by someone threatening him. He would never let anybody break his will. So let's write that. That's under character. He had strong character. God needed that in a leader to help form this new country. So he had a strong will and convictions. So you can write that down under character. Let's continue reading. People knew Samuel Adams was a man of integrity. That means he was honest and truthful, didn't cheat, did what he said he was going to do, that sort of thing. Fame, fortune, or flattery could not sway him from the Christian convictions which controlled his thinking and his decisions. His desires were set upon the good of his country. Nothing would change his constant effort to preserve liberty. Trials and hardships only made him stronger in his convictions. So he knew what was right for his country. He had read the Bible. He knew what God had said about how people should govern themselves, and nobody could make him change his mind. No amount of difficulty or sadness or anything, no problems could make him change his mind. So we can write down he was a man of integrity. That means he was honest and true. Man of integrity. So if somebody says you have integrity, you can say thank you, because it's a compliment. And he never gave up on liberty for the colonies. Never. Make sure you're in the right column. You should be in the character column. Never gave up on liberty for the colonies. You might have to write a little bit smaller if you're a person who doesn't write small. Never gave up on liberty for the colonies. Let's continue reading. Top of page 113, second column. Samuel Adams wrote pamphlets and newspaper articles which declared the colonists' rights. A pamphlet is like a little thin little book. It might be just one page folded in threes, or it might be a book of 4 or 5 pages, but something little that was easily printed, not a big book that had to be sewn together with a hardcover and all that. The colonists believed that they had these rights because of English law, but even more importantly, because they were God-given rights of liberty. Do you see where I'm reading? Let's read that again. That's really important. The colonists believed that they had these rights because of English law. They were English citizens, most of them, because this was an English colony. But even more importantly, they believed it because these were God-given rights of liberty. One of his famous pamphlets, written in 1772, that's only 4 years before the Revolution began, was titled Rights of the Colonists. The pamphlet declared the colonists' rights as men, as Christians, and as subjects, that means subjects of the king. Samuel Adams was unwavering. He would not stop going for it in his conviction that as Christians, they must oppose the actions of the British Parliament. Remember, Parliament is the government of England under the king. Parliament was doing many unfair and unjust things to the colonists, and he believed, and he never would change his mind, that the colonists had to oppose that, had to be against it, they had to stop it. Now, there were some people living in the colonies who said, oh no, we don't need to do that, we just need to obey the king because he's our king. Well, yes, he is the king, and God says obey your leaders, but he doesn't say to obey unjust laws. There comes a time, and that's what Samuel Adams said. Now is the time, we can't do this anymore. So let's, under contributions now, we're going to make another column on my board over here, and we're going to write down what he wrote. I'll be right back. You should still be on the first page of your history. If you had to go to the second page for a little bit of that first column, that's okay, but now you need to come back to here and write this right here. So far on this column, all you should have is nothing. This is the first thing you're going to put on there. So we could write down, he wrote pamphlets. That's not, people say pamphlet, but it's a PH right there. It's an F sound. Pamphlets, and newspaper articles. And then in 1772, he wrote a very useful pamphlet called Rights of the Colonist. So write those things down on your chart under contributions. So we're in this third column over here. This should be the first thing in this column. Please pay attention to which column we're writing in. If you get to writing over some of these darker colors and they don't want to write, you can take your eraser, kind of lighten it up a little bit, because it will erase off the page, and then you can write over it. Or you can use black pen. Once you've got it down in pencil the right way, you can go over it in pen. Let's continue reading. We're going to go on to the next little section, educated the colonists in ideas. Samuel Adams constantly worked to promote the idea of independence. I'm reading right here. Samuel Adams constantly worked to promote the idea of independence. He knew that the only way the American colonists would declare independence from England would be if the people understood their rights were based upon Christian ideas. Because it wasn't fun what the king was doing to them. It wasn't fair, it wasn't just, but it was probably easier to just go along and be under the king, because it was kind of like having the big helper over you to protect you. And it was kind of a little bit unsettling to think about being independent. But they were losing their rights, their liberties, and giving those away in exchange for a little bit of protection they might have gotten from England. And now England was turning on them. We're going to see that in a minute. So right here, he worked to educate the colonists in the ideas of independence. Samuel Adams encouraged public discussions and debates of the biblical ideas, which would bring independence. Soon, discussions were taking place in every corner of Boston. Do you remember last chapter they talked about the town meeting? And they talked about Thursday lecture at church. People were talking all the time about all of this. They got together and they discussed it. It was a big subject. Everybody was talking about it. So we're going to write some more on this third column under contributions. Samuel Adams believed the colonists would unite if they were educated about independence. If they knew what the Bible really said, if they knew the rights that were being taken away from them, God-given rights, they wouldn't stand for it. They would unite and want to separate from England. So he spent tireless hours educating and talking with people. Let's turn the page. In 1772, I'm at the top of page 114 now. In 1772, Samuel Adams proposed committees of correspondence. Correspondence means letter writing. In an educational effort to unite the colonies in knowledge, sentiment, that means feelings about it, and purpose, their decision of what to do. His idea was for each town to express itself and to write to the other towns. Thus, town by town and colony by colony, each individual could not only become informed and educated, but could inform and educate others. He never grew tired in his constant effort to educate the colonists in their understanding of local self-government. That was really smart, I think, because if he had to go around and tell everybody, he probably couldn't have told nearly as many people, and probably some people would just kind of roll their eyes and go, oh, there goes Samuel Adams again. But if the city of Boston wrote a letter and they sent it to the city of Salem, And Salem wrote a letter back saying what they thought, and they sent that letter not just to Boston, but to other cities. And pretty soon these letters from the cities were going back and forth because they couldn't get on the phone or the TV and discuss things, or the internet, but they could write. They could write letters back and forth. So this was a brilliant idea that Samuel Adams came up with. So in 1772, he began the Committees of Correspondence. So you can put this also under contributions. You can start writing right now. I can hear you saying, Miss Margaret, you're in the way, I can't see. I know. Happens all the time. All right, that's where we're going to stop for today. So both of these, all of this that you wrote here should be right here on your paper. You should have some stuff going down a ways here. You're probably near the bottom on this one. So tomorrow or the next day, whenever I put out the next video, we'll be moving on to go to the second page, this light colored version of the first page, and continuing our notes. Thanks for your hard work.